Big 12, deepest conference in the country. All due respect to the SEC, all due respect to the Big 10. There's 7 legitimate teams that I'm like, you could win the conference title. There's 7. And because of that, I think it's almost a 0% chance they'll get a second team into the playoff. Just because I don't trust with what that league is, I do not trust the team that loses the conference championship game to have fewer than 3 losses at that point, if that's one of their losses. So at that point, like it's just not going to happen when you start doing the math and you play out these schedule with teams like Missouri and Penn State and Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Like there's too many other teams from the power conferences. So this Big 12 could be like wild.
Here's what I encourage people to do when you're talking about the Big 12. Pretend the playoff doesn't even exist, and this will be the most fun thing to watch you watch all season. I started calling it America's College Football Conference back in the spring, and it was in response to people. I wasn't just trying to come up with some moniker. Brett Yormark didn't pay me for it or anything, but I kept listening to the most common complaints.
If you asked him, he probably would, because that's a good name.
I got no shortage of ideas over here. But look, you aggregate this just like I do. The most common complaints the average fan would have is they're a little turned off by what NIL actually has become. They are very turned off about the amount of roster churn and how meaningless a roster is because of how much of it may be flipped next year. Coaches as well. A third of the coaches in college football changed jobs this past cycle, which is just an absurd number. People are turned off by that stuff. Okay, well, if you claim you're turned off by that and you love competitive balance, where do you have that in more plentiful supply, or the things you don't like in less supply than the Big 12? So watch it for what it is. They're probably only going to get one team in. But, man, you're talking about one possession game after one possession game. You're talking about 10 teams, I think I counted earlier tonight, with like plus 1,200 or better odds to win the conference right now. I could pitch you on Iowa State. Pound for pound, I think TCU is the most underrated team in the country right now. Certainly, Kansas State, Utah.
I didn't even include TCU in my 7, so that would move my number to 8.
Nobody is, and Sonny Dykes would love for you to keep it that way. The only shot that this, ironically, the only shot they have of making more playoff noise is for the conference to be less entertaining. So, like a Kansas State and a Utah, they just elevate way above and beyond, and then you've got. You know, what's crazy is a couple of years ago, how crazy would it be for you to say a team from the Big 12 is not going to win the conference title and they're going to go to the national title game in a 4-team field? Because that's what TCU did. History remembers them winning the conference title, and they didn't. Kansas State did.
Yeah.
But because the two elevated, kept winning close games every week, they were able to. I don't think that'll be the case. Selfishly, I'd rather it just be a car wreck out there every week, but in the best of ways. And I got my heartstrings really being tugged by Iowa State right now, because I don't think Matt Campbell's any different a coach than he was 2 years ago when he was everyone's darling.
I know what you're doing. You're riding the old Excite Bike track.
Sure.
That's what you're doing, right?
Yeah, it pays off.
Because that's what Iowa State is. They're a developmental program. They're never going to stay way up on top. They're like, that's just not what they're going to do. They don't have the money. They're not going to recruit that way. But if you tell Matt Campbell that you can get some guys and he can take them up the mountain and get to a place where they're playing really elite football, and they leave, guess what? They're going to go way back down. It's going to take them a couple years to then get a dip and then come right back up. And I think what you're saying is you think that they're on that little trajectory right there where they could be a team like they were 3-4 years ago.
I don't even get why it's hard to see. People have the memory of a tomato can. Like they all of a sudden forget, like 2 years ago. First off, they forget what history has told them Iowa State football is. History says there's not even a peak. It's just a forever dip. So then he comes along and he includes a peak every now and then. Well, then people see him win like 8 or 9 games one year, and then he doesn't repeat it, so he's trash, and good thing USC didn't get him. It's like this guy is wringing every drop out of the sponge that is Iowa State. I'm telling you, some Southern teams, I don't want to name anyone in particular, came after that quarterback with a lot more money than he makes at Iowa State, and he chose to stay there. I mean, Abu Sama, that running back, chased a lot of other guys off. Jalen Noel out at wide receiver. Like, they've got the kind of guy that an Iowa State would need to have. They all got to stay healthy, obviously. They got the kind of guy that if the dust clears and they're playing in Dallas in early December for the Big 12 championship game, that's the kind of guy they would have to have.
Colorado. Go.
Yeah. Yeah. I want you to lead this. Colorado, what am I looking at here? I think you guys are going double-digit winner in
bullish
week
on
one.
Colorado. People call me a homer, but I've done this for long enough to understand that when you have returning starters at important spots, then the way the games played out in the previous season matter a lot. And when you look at what Colorado was last year, they played 6 ranked opponents. Oregon blew them out, and then the other 5, they were in a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter. Now you've got a returning starting quarterback who might be a top 10 pick. You've got a returning utility man in Travis Hunter, likely a top 10 pick, maybe top 5 pick, probably a top 5 pick. And you're much better on the line of scrimmage, and you don't have to face the gauntlet of quarterbacks that they faced last year in the Pac-12. I know Vegas has said 5.5. My over/under number is 8.
Oh my goodness!
I think they're an 8-win team all day long, maybe more.
So hold on. Posture. Let me lean back up. I think they've got a much better football team than people realize. People have gotten so caught up in that noise that I just flat out think they're a better football team than 5.5. Now, I think they're going to flex a little bit in week 1 against North Dakota State. That's my opinion. That's not a conference game, though. They hop up to Nebraska week 2, and it gets started. Here is the potential downfall, if there is one. I think that 2 things. I'm going to weirdly mix Utah in here, but please follow me because this is going to be convoluted. Utah's advantage in the Pac-12 was that their style was atypical to pretty much anyone else in the Pac-12. So it was always a matchup nightmare when you had to play them because they were the only one that wanted to go through you. Everyone else kind of wanted to go around you. They come into a conference now that is a bunch of that. And it may be that style is not the week in, week out advantage for Utah that it used to be. Still a really good team. They may be the best team there. But it's not physically that they overwhelm folks and bloody their lip and everyone taps out like they would for them sometimes in the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 or the Big 12 is not a pinball league. It is very much a blue-collar roll-up-your-sleeves kind of league now. So people just don't watch it enough. So they don't know that.
I mean, Oklahoma State's going to run the ball. Kansas State's going to run the ball.
Every one of them.
Your contenders are going to run the rock.
So then Colorado comes in here. So I had a buddy of mine who, kind of a casual fan, he'll watch Colorado, he'll watch some of the big boys. He texts me, and he says, whoa, man, Deion and them, they're going to the Big 12. They're going to run roughshod over that league. They'll spike right to the top. I said, why is that? He said, well, they've got players like Travis Hunter and Shedeur. The Big 12 doesn't really send a whole lot of guys into the first round of the draft, do they? I said, no, they do not. That's not necessarily the advantage that you think it is, though, because what you end up in the trade-off with in the aggregate is you end up with a lot of 4th and 5th year seniors littered on the starting 22. They're guys who a lot of times know this is the pinnacle of their career. They're great culture programs. All of them are like just little bowling balls that if you've got your you-know-what together and you're talented, you can do what Alabama did to Kansas State a couple of years ago in the Sugar Bowl. However, if you're not, and you're just a bunch of pieces instead of a program, you get your tree shaken every week in the Big 12. So I either see it going really good or really poor for Colorado. I don't really have like a middle-of-the-road prediction for them. However,
all or nothing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about them this year. Here's my other question for you, because my take on just Deion in general, because there's a headline of him every day, is some of it I like, some of it I don't like. In totality, I love that he's here. Like, I love Deion Sanders in college football. I always have possessed this very weird trait that I don't have to approve of every single action in your life to holistically like appreciate that you're in my life. In this case, you're in college football. And yet I don't see that in a lot of really plentiful supply right now. It's like if Deion does something I don't like, I've got to castigate the guy. Not necessarily crazy about some of the stuff he's done. Don't always green check mark everything he says. Love that he's there, but you are Colorado. Like, you played out there, you're closer to the program than I am. How do people feel about that?
Well, people around the program love him. People in Boulder love him. People in Colorado love him. And I'm the same way. If I was advising him on a day in and day out basis, would I agree with everything that he does and says? No, I wouldn't. Does that make me like throw my hands up and say like, well, he's terrible? Of course not. Of course not. Part of what makes him who he is and makes him valuable, in particular to that program, is that he is unapologetically himself all the time. All the time. And he doesn't care what you think about him. He doesn't care what that guy thinks about him when he's dealing with you. He is genuinely one of one in so many different ways. And I will just tell you that program, this is what people fail to realize. That program couldn't sell a ticket. They were the worst Power 5 program in the country. And he came in and made them relevant. He made them valuable. And now he put them on a stage where everybody's got an opinion. So he doesn't care what your opinion is. He just cares that there's an opinion. And a lot of people around Colorado are in that boat. This program is finally relevant after more than 2 decades of basically being irrelevant. So that's what he does. And the other part about this, and I get slammed for saying this, but I'll say it again. And I think that Nick Saban and what he said, kind of backs this up. He's more old school than you think. I know he talks a lot of flash, but he is more old school in how he deals with players and what they're required to do, both around the building, on the practice field, in the weight room, in the locker room, all of those areas. And he's got a very high level of expectation for all of those players. How that works out this year, I'm not sure. I do believe that they're going to win 8 games, maybe more. And in particular, if Shedeur plays well. Remember, he got sacked 52 times, Josh. 52. This is one of those cases where people are like, it's very similar to Lincoln Riley with a defense. Everyone's like, well, he's never going to play good defense. Well, does he need good defense or does he need average defense? For Shedeur, do they need a good offensive line or do they just need an average offensive line? Because there is a gigantic step forward from horrible like they were a year ago up front to just average. And if they get that, then you can probably talk me into a lot of wins. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.